Hi everyone, it's Jill Foster here for a PB&J card class, and this card class will have a holiday theme featuring new stamps from Penny Black's Season of Hope release. And here is a look at the card that we will be creating today. And this card features one of my favorite stamps from this new holiday collection, and that is 40-761 Seasons Tweetings. And this is a cling stamp that we call a brushstroke stamp that gives you the look of a hand painted card. Now, I just wanted to mention that I will have a full supply list up on screen at the very end of the video. So if you want to check that out in more detail, just hit pause at that time and you can see a list of everything I'm using in this video. Now, to start off, I'm using my Misty Stamp Positioning Tool to stamp this Seasons Tweetings onto watercolor paper. And I'm just stamping this with just a really light color. This is Memento ink in the color of Summer Sky, and I just like to have that in there as sort of a guide image for me as I am stamping and working on my card. So you can't see it very well in the video, but as I am inking up the stamp and moving forward, I'm able to see that. And I chose blue because that's the dominant color in my design, and it's very light so I can color over the top. Now I am going to color directly onto my stamp using ARTEZA Real Brush markers or pens, and these allow me to color in right around those berries, and they are a water soluble marker, so I can blend them with water after I've stamped them. Now, they do dry fairly quickly, and I like that because it does retain some of the detail of that stamped impression, and also they have a really rich color. So I just wanted to show you here on these leaves. I first stamped them, added a little water to blend them. Here I'm going in, I colored with one of those markers onto just an old acrylic block to use as a palette. And I'm just adding some of that brightness of that green there up at the top. And then this is that same blue that I stamped with, and I'm going to add this right on top too. It's going to give a bit of a smoother look to those berries. I can also add a darker color to add a touch of a shading and darker right around the top. And this is really a layering process. You can see with each layer and more water that those stamped leaves, they remain, keep some of that texture underneath that I originally stamped, but also get more of that flowing watercolor look. So anytime you stamp with markers, when you're coloring onto the stamp, it is going to pick up some of those brush strokes of your actual marker going onto the stamp. So it's not going to stamp quite as evenly as if you use an ink pad. And then also I'm stamping onto this Canson watercolor paper. It does have some texture to it as well. So that is something to consider when you are stamping. I like to use watercolor paper because, as you can see, I'm adding lots of layers of color onto this. And I like the texture that it provides too for a one-layer card like this. But if you like a little crisper impression when you first stamp and a little bit more ease in blending these markers, you may want to stamp onto something like a Bristol Smooth cardstock. You can see there I added some color directly from the marker right onto the paper. That gives me a really nice dark rich color, and I think because this card is fairly monochromatic, it's mostly blues, a nice variation in darks to light help it from becoming too flat. So the paper there with those leaves is still a little bit wet, and I'm just going in now and doing a little more blending with those markers. Now I continued that process on some other leaves, and then here I'm just grabbing a green marker and just adding a touch of that to the tips of the leaves and then blending it out with a wet paintbrush. And I really love how that brought those to life, just adding that touch of green. So now I'm going to work on the bird. You can see I already did the rest of the leaves, just following that same procedure. When I did stamp the leaf that has the tail there, if I got any ink right on the tail, I just wiped it off with my finger. Now here I am stamping this just with some Memento ink just to darken it up, doing a couple of impressions, and you can see there how nicely using that ink pad, even onto the textured cardstock, you retain those beautiful details on the bird. Now I'm going to go in and just color in the branch. Now I'm using the ARTEZA Real Brush pens. You could also use any type of water-soluble marker to do this. I love the richness of the color of these. Here I'm going to go in and get the eye of the bird. And I had already gotten the beak a little bit, and you can see now it looks so nice once you can see his beak and his eye. I love this bird. I think he's just a happy looking bird. Now here I'm feathering on some shading and just sort of accentuating some of the details of his feathers that you can see already are part of the stamp. So you don't have to come up with those on your own. That's one thing I love about stamping. I am not an illustrator, but I do love to color, and the stamp can guide me where those details on those feathers should be. So I'm just playing around with that and feathering that on and stamping it down. And with each impression, you can see that bird come more and more to life. Now I'm just going to pick up one of my markers, and again, all of the exact colors used will be listed up on screen at the very end of the video, and I'm just going to color these berries just right directly onto the paper. That initial stamping that I did with that summer sky ink makes it really easy to do this because that is right there. I can see right where those berries are. And I'm also going to pick up a little bit of that color and add it right here on the bird, just coloring directly over what I've already stamped. It's a very nice light color. Now here I colored with that onto my palette, some of those blues. I've watered it down and I am painting my background just very lightly. I am being careful not to touch the painting and stamping that I have already done. Now if I had planned ahead, I could certainly have painted a blue background like this before I even began stamping, but often I either don't haven't planned that far, or even if I do know I'm going to paint a background, I want to see how dark the shading is and the coloring on my leaves and my bird so that I can use that when I'm judging how dark or light I want to make that background. So I can just blend with water, kind of keeping it wet along a wet edge, and that allows me to keep painting and sort of changing that color. I kind of work below the branch and above the branch. Mix different colors of the blue together, and you can see it's wet there, so I can drop it in and the paint will just move and flow onto that background. And as I want it to fade out to more of the white of the background, I just add more water than I do the ink from the palette. I'm also going to be doing some tone-on-tone stamping onto this background, so if you are painting a background and you aren't completely happy with the background, just grab some other stamps, as you'll see me doing here in a bit, and keep going. So you don't need to be afraid if your background isn't just as you had imagined. Now this is one of our stamps called Berry Speckled, and this is the one I'm just adding some tone-on-tone background stamping here. Again, inking that up with that Summer Sky Memento ink. I just wanted to go really, really light with that. Start light and then go darker if I want to. So I started very light, and then now I'm just feathering on some of those same colors using the marker, lightly spritzing with water, and then stamping that onto the background. And I was really happy with how that turned out, adding just a touch of that green, tying into those other that other coloring that I had done on the Seasons Tweetings stamp. And then now I will go in and get these, I guess you would call them branches, with another marker. And then stamp that down. And And sorry about that, just off screen, I am grabbing another marker, doing the same thing as I did with the other berries. I am just coloring those in directly onto the paper. And I missed a little bit of the branch there and I want to darken that up, so I'm just restamping that again. And I can also just take my marker right to, when it's really small and delicate, sometimes it's hard to capture that on the textured watercolor paper. So don't be afraid, especially with these markers, just to go direct to your paper as well. The brush on these is just like a paintbrush, so it gives you that same look. Now I continued that on the upper right hand corner. Now this is just some gouache paint, and I've mixed it with water, and I am using that to splatter to add some snow to my background. And just making sure, I love how that looks on those dark blue leaves. It really shows up beautifully. And then finally, I've grabbed an acrylic marker in titanium white. This is also by ARTEZA. And I'm just adding a little bit larger snowflakes randomly here and there, making sure to also get a few of those onto those leaves. And that will dry very light, but I like the difference in the size and also the lightness and darkness, especially up in person. You can't see those quite as much in real or on video as you can in real life. So to finish things off, I've stamped my sentiment. This is from our new transparent set 30-737 Christmas Feeling. And here is the look at the finished card. I just love this layout. I love this bird, and it was really fun to do it in a bit of a monochromatic style. But if you like a little bit more color, I wanted to show you, here is another card with that same stamp, similar layout, that coming over from the right hand side of the card. For this, I stamped it onto watercolor paper using Toffee Crunch ink, and then I used Distress re-inkers used as watercolors, and I just painted right on top of the light brown image for the no line watercolor look. I thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you are inspired. If you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Don't forget, you can also connect with Penny Black on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, Twitter, as well as our website and blog. And I will link all of those for you down in the YouTube description box below. And if you stay tuned, here is that complete supply list as promised.